Good afternoon, everyone, and a very, very warm welcome. If you're joining us from different parts of the world, good morning or good evening to you. It's just a minute after 2 o'clock, and from what I can see, I think we're about almost 400 in the room. I must, at the very outset, say this is hugely encouraging for all of us. This is our second webinar. And at the very outset, we began this entire initiative to help build the teaching community and to help develop best practices, and most importantly, to be able to share this with everybody. So post the last webinar, the amount of support and encouragement we got has truly egged us all on, and we're all very excited. And my other colleagues in the team are also raring to go, and in time to come, they will also be presenting for you. Before we start, I just some basic house rules. Please, if you have to ask some questions, please use the Q&A box. This helps us distill and filter through the questions to know what are real questions. Of course, you can continue to use the chat if we're just generally chatting. Post the last webinar, we got a lot of inquiries about a certificate for participation, and quite honestly, it surprised us a little bit. So yes, we are going to do that as well. In fact, many of last week's attendants would have started to receive theirs. It's a letter of appreciation from our side, and we will continue to do that for every webinar. But please just bear with us because the processing load is quite huge. So we're working through all of that at the same time. The tone of all our webinars has always been about first building skills and looking at what is relevant in today's education world, and then talking about tasks that facilitate the development of those skills, and then finally, of course, looking at how assessments happen in that regard. And that is pretty much going to be the tone as we go forward. Now, we understand that there are a lot of teachers, very, very senior teachers in this forum, and many teachers who are just starting out and trying to build a practice. So we welcome you both. And we thank you for coming onto the same forum. From our side, because we're doing this for the very first time, we're going to take it logically through the tasks, through the subjects, through the skills. And then, of course, within each subject, we will deep dive into the grades, into the levels, into classroom practice, into teaching activities, and so on. So please bear with us, but do continue to tell us what you're looking for. That's really, really helpful for a lot of us because it helps us curate and work material that would be immediately beneficial to all of us on this forum. So on that note, I'm going to say a very warm welcome and thank you for joining us today. I would like to introduce my colleague, Shoma Podar, who is my co-host and will be taking you through the rest of the session. And of course, I will come back at the end to help join the questions, the answers, and the chats. Welcome, Shoma. Good afternoon.
Thank you, Dale. Hello, everyone. A very good afternoon and welcome to this series of webinars conducted by Trinity College London, India. I think most of you here are familiar with the name Trinity, but can you just give me a moment, please? That's right. I think most of you here are familiar with the name Trinity College London, but for those who aren't, we're an international exam board and we offer assessments in music, drama, performing arts, communication skills, and English language. Trinity's ethos as an exam board is not just to provide reliable assessments, but to also support teachers like Dale mentioned a couple of minutes back. And the whole focus of these webinars is not just for you to have some idea about our many exams, but for all of us to grow as a teaching community, to be able to share ideas, and most importantly, to be able to learn from one another. In today's webinar, I'm going to talk about how we can teach the 4 functional components of language proficiency: reading, writing, listening, and speaking the 21st century way, the modern way. And I'm also going to try and keep the flow of the webinar according to skills, tasks, and finally assessments. But before I start talking about LSRW, I'd like for you to have a look at a couple of photos of some very interesting people. And incidentally, 3 of them happen to be my colleagues from Trinity. Well, not Fedra. And the one thing they have in common, all of them, can you guess what that is? They're all highly skilled. They're all very good at doing certain skills. And this is exactly what we want from our students, our learners. We want them to be able to show us what they can do with reading, writing, listening, and speaking, as opposed to just knowing about these skills. We often say language learning is a process of skills acquisition. What it means is that in order to learn a language or in order to get better at a language, you need skills. Just like you need skills to get better at, say, learning how to play racquetball or playing the guitar. And like any other skill, this process of language learning needs a lot of effort, a considerable amount of goal setting, and patience. Lots and lots of patience. And sometimes we tend to forget that, but that's one of the most important things about skills acquisition. Now, what do you think our students need in order to succeed in the 21st century? I'm going to rephrase this question. What do you think educators and employers all over the world are looking for from our candidates, from our learners? Are they just looking for candidates with good grades and good language skills? Absolutely not. What employers and educators want is for candidates to demonstrate that they have a skills profile. So our candidates will have to demonstrate not just language skills, but also essential, some crucial transferable skills and healthy study strategies. But what does it mean for our classrooms? What does it mean for the language classroom? Does it mean that we stop teaching grammar, phonology, vocabulary, etc.? Absolutely not. We continue teaching whatever good things we're doing with our students, but maybe we could try and also incorporate some of these skills in our regular LSRW classes. And I'm going to show you how we can do that. It's pretty simple. But let's also have a quick look at what these skills really mean. Now, the first segment in this pie chart is language skills. So we all know what language skills are, but when I ask you, if I say, what is language proficiency? It's the ability to use language in your regular real-world context, in a non-rehearsed manner, in a context that is acceptable and appropriate. Gone are the days when employers would just ask for oral skills. Now our candidates will have to showcase all 4 skills. In the language learning community, we often talk about something called CEFR. For those of you who are not familiar with it, CEFR is an acronym for a Common European Framework of Reference. You can see it down on the screen below. It is an international benchmarking. It's an international framework of reference to describe language ability in any language, actually. So the CEFR is roughly divided into 6 levels. So you have at the lowest or breakthrough level, the beginner level, which is at A1, and it goes all the way up to native English speaker level, or C2, which is the most advanced level. Now, what all these levels do is they describe your abilities in LSRW. So it's a no-brainer that if you have a qualification or a certificate that shows what level on the CEFR you're at an advantage, because that's exactly what employers want for. They want you to evidence that you have certain skills, and if it's on a certificate or a qualification, then it makes it more formal and more valid and a little more credible, as opposed to just making it a subjective opinion, oh, I'm very good at this skill. Now, transferable skills or 21st century skills are a wide range of amorphous body of range of skills and knowledge, and they go by many different names. So some people like to call them cross-disciplinary skills, transversal skills, transferable skills. That's because they don't belong to any niche domain or a niche subject. Just to give you an example, and this is a wide range of skills. So what you're seeing here is just a few. For LSRW, you have critical thinking, problem solving, collaboration, etc. But can they be taught in your English language classes? Absolutely. I'm going to show you a very simple example, very simple activity. Suppose you want to do a reading activity with your students. Instead of giving a whole long linear task, why don't you just break it up into smaller chunks or smaller portions, bite-sized portions, and have your students read reading one bit at a time. And then you go on to do a read, pause, summarize, or paraphrase and predict exercise with them. So in order to do this activity, your students will have to work in small groups of maybe 2 or 3 students max. They read the text, they stop where you want them to stop, they take turns to summarize what they've read so far, and they also have to predict what they think could come later in the passage. Now, the summarizing bit is very important because unless they've understood what the passage is about, they won't be able to summarize. And with lower level learners, maybe you could give more framed activities, more framed questions like, what do you think the author is trying to present here? What details do you think the author is going to come up and present? Or what is the author's tone? Is he for or against the topic? So what's happening now is that candidates are not just trying to predict, they're also being active readers. With your higher or slightly older kids or older students, you could play around with the text a little bit. So maybe you could omit certain parts of the text. So you give them the title and the first sentence of the paragraph, and they have to predict what the passage could be about. Or you give them maybe the first paragraph and the last paragraph, and they have to guess what the body of the passage is about. But here they have to try and at least justify their reasoning, why they have come to a certain prediction about this activity. So if you're doing an activity like this in the class, what 21st century skills do you think you're enabling? Can you type it on the chat box, please? I'm going to repeat this again. If you're doing an activity like this, the read, pause, predict, what 21st century skills are you enabling in the classroom?
Shoma, just to tell you what's coming in, we are getting answers like critical thinking,
yes,
transferability, collaboration, creativity, imagination, understanding.
Absolutely. Yes. I can see the chats, Dale. Thank you so much. Yes. So absolutely. And also inference, which is something that comes in, doubles up as a study strategy as well as a key 21st century skill. Thank you so much. That's right. So coming to the last, So coming to the last segment in the pie chart, what about study strategies? These are a brilliant, absolutely amazing set of skills and tools that you give your students, that you enable your students to get more control of their learning. Now, I honestly believe, it's my opinion, that these are tools that you need to teach your students, because unless a student or a learner is extremely precautious, it's almost impossible or very difficult to be able to learn these skills on their own. I mean, I can tell you from my personal experience that I learned it much later on in university, as late as universities, and when I was in university. So somewhere we need to help our students with these study strategies. Now, the beauty of it is that you don't have to do it every day. You don't have to spend a lot of time. And maybe you do it twice or thrice at the beginning of your lessons or at the beginning of your term, and it stays with your students for the rest of their lives as a subconscious tool. So if you're doing a listening exercise, for example, you teach them how to take proper notes, and there are different methods of doing that. You don't have to do it every time you do a listening exercise. Or if you're teaching writing, you have to be able to teach them how to review and to collaborate before publishing, or editing before publishing the final writing, the final piece of writing. So these are good tools, and we're going to go into details about it when we do our skills separately in subsequent webinars. Now, my favorite part of LSRW is, so what you see right now is how two broad skills like reading and writing have been broken down into smaller parts or subskills. Now, the whole raft of subskills that you see here are the smaller parts that constitute reading and writing. So you have skimming, scanning, gist, summarizing, evaluating quality, revising, and all these smaller parts need individual attention. So you know what it is you're practicing with your students, and then you put it back into the bigger picture, which could be an exam task or a regular school leaving exam, a summative exam, or a Trinity exam. So if your students know how to do this, they will understand the mechanism of a question task or any reading or writing or listening and speaking that comes in later on in their lives. The same goes for just a minute, sorry. Just to give you an example, suppose you're doing a linear long reading passage, a reading comprehension passage, approximately of 400 to 600 word limit. This is something that we do every day, right, with our students. The kind of comprehension questions that we typically are familiar with, these kind of tasks would be gap fills or true or false questions or assigning the correct title, right? In order to attempt such questions, your students will need subskills like skimming, scanning, supporting examples, comparing. So it would make sense to focus a little more on this before moving on to the bigger picture. And you have a similar set of subskills for listening and speaking as well. So you have elicitation, survival strategies, paraphrasing, inferring, predicting, etc. So these are the smaller parts that constitute the bigger picture. And in this context, I'd like to share an anecdote from my favorite sportsperson's life, Roger Federer, and I'm sure you've guessed by now that I'm kind of obsessed with him. Now, between the year 2012 and 2013, he was going through a really rough patch in his game. Yes, the god of tennis was going through a very bad time, and that was partly to do with the fact that he had a weak backhand. And also, it didn't help that his biggest rival was Nadal. So, after a lot of deliberations, Federer decided to modernize his racket. So he went from a 90 square inch racket frame to a 95 square inch racket frame just to practice on that backhand. And the story goes that he dedicated 1 month of his life on just this small bit of his game. And maybe the bigger picture was to win more Grand Slams or to win more tournaments and to defeat Nadal. But the fact of the matter is, this is exactly what he did. He concentrated on a smaller part of his game before moving on to a bigger tournament. Maybe we can learn something from this. Maybe we need to focus. It's very normal to get carried away by the bigger picture, the bigger tasks in life. So an exam or Trinity exam. So maybe we could just perhaps take one step backward and maybe just focus on the minute bits first. And again, we're going to go into details about how to include these subskills in our regular LSRW classes, because that's very important. And I'm going to show you how we can incorporate them through very practical and doable classroom activities. And Just to give you an example, suppose you were to do a subskill activity to get the main idea, main information through skimming. We all know that we use skimming as a speed reading technique, right? Now, would you just give your students a regular linear reading comprehension passage and ask them to read it very quickly? Will that help? Maybe it would, because our millennials are expert skim readers. It comes naturally to them because they're exposed to a lot of information courtesy of the internet. And it's like a digital literacy for them. So it's really, to say it colloquially, it's really no big deal. But in order to be an expert skim reader, efficacy of understanding is more important than just being able to read something quickly. And this is exactly what we need to train our students for. This is what we need to do by giving them tools to do it better. Now, what I almost always do or did with my reading and writing classes is, irrespective of what reading passage I give to my students, I always would ask them to write a short tags on the side. So this slide is self-explanatory. You have to write a 1 or 2 sentence title for each paragraph. Completely depends on you. If you have the time, you can just spend a little more time with title, what the author's purpose is, what the genre is. The genre, of course, would remain the same if you are dealing with one passage. And also a 1 or a 2 sentence summary of every paragraph, not just the whole passage. Now, what an activity like this really does is, first, it makes your students more active readers. So instead of their attention going all over the place, they're focusing on every bit of the passage. And the second thing that it also helps you do is, it helps them to understand the main idea at the paragraph level, and also to be able to connect it with the bigger overarching main idea of the whole passage. This is very important because as learners start to move away from the Harry Potter style of reading passages to more academic, boring, expository text, which is very normal, and there's no way out of that. Our students, and I'm sure all of you will agree with this, we start losing your students, their eyes start glazing over. They find it difficult to focus because the reading tasks starts getting more and more intimidating because it's boring. So the process doesn't have to be boring. The passages can be boring. So this is one way of getting them more interested. And I very strongly believe that this is something that you should start doing from lower level, from middle school upwards, because they need to understand that irrespective of what the text is, what the reading task is, there's a way to deconstruct it. And that's where we step in. I really do love this, and I thought I should share with all of you because it's something our senior colleagues from Trinity London have also shared with us. There's a software called rewordify.com. So if you have lower level learners, say middle school, and it's quite natural that teachers don't have enough resources. How many reading passages can you give? So what you can do is, maybe you take a regular reading passage, you copy paste it on the software, and it literally rewordifies it for you. So it will simplify the reading passage for you. And then you share screen with your students if you're teaching remotely or if you do it face-to-face. Or if you have a mixed level group of students and you want to stick to just one text, one reading passage, you give one group of students a slightly complex word or language, and the others a shorter and simpler one. So it's entirely up to you how you do it. The other website is dreamreader.net. It's really a dream because it has many categories. So you have categories as diverse as supernatural, popular culture, science, fiction, you name it, it's there. And the best part is it also gives you levels. So you have a beginner level, intermediate, and also advanced level. So all you need to do is you choose your category, you choose which genre you want. There you have enough and more reading comprehension passages. So that's all you need to do. It's important to make reading activities interactive, because this already students always see reading as the bugbear, the one that throws you off guard. It doesn't have to be that way. I would recommend that you let your students work in small groups. It doesn't have to be an individual one-person activity. If you can do the same with listening and speaking, why not reading? And it's not as if you have to do it every day. Maybe once in a while is good, so they get to work with their peers, and it gets a little less boring. Okay, so coming to how do modern readers read? Now, do we always read linear text? Just to give you an example, so maybe you're reading something on the Hindu or a newspaper article about climate crisis, and then you read something on the same lines in a magazine editorial, or a cartoon on social media, say like Green Humor, which I follow, and it's about wildlife conservation. Now, broadly, the theme is the same, but what we're doing is we're reading different kinds of text. We're recognizing different formats, we're recognizing different writers' bias. So this is what our learners, our millennials, are actually doing all the time. So why give them boring linear reading passages? Why not give them something like this? What you're seeing right now are 3 discrete factual reading passages. They all have something in common, a theme, a common topic, and they also have an infographic, what you see right in the middle of the text, text C, yes. So it could be a graph or it could be a cartoon like I mentioned before. And the students will have to answer questions, reading comprehension questions, based on their understanding of these 3 reading passages. But can we do it in our classrooms? Absolutely. I would suggest that maybe you could get your students to bring in the reading passages from home. So if you decide what topic you want to talk about. Say you want to read about the effects of lockdown on teenagers, and they go and hunt out reading passages, so from news feeds or from social media, and then they work in groups and identify difference in structures, difference in facts and opinions, identifying or differentiating between facts and opinions. Now, our learners may be familiar with a format like this, but it's our job to help them critique information, to help them discriminate between information, to help them understand what are facts, what are opinions. This is more important now than ever before, because everything you read, or not everything, more or less, most of the things we read these days masquerade as facts, when all it is maybe just the writer's subjective opinion. So we need to teach our students, we need to help them understand the difference between facts and opinions, different kinds of texts, different writers' opinions. So this is a fantastic way to make reading tasks more relatable as well, because that's exactly how they read. Okay, so coming to the last bit, listening and speaking. So my absolute favorite listening activity is the dictogloss, and I've done it to the death with students because I've suffered many times not being a good listener, so I would go overboard with it. And a dictogloss is not really dictation. It's not dictation at all. So in dictation, you'd be taking down word for word. Dictogloss is where you read a text. You want to read, that's fine, or you want to play it on a recorder or a device, that's absolutely fine. And your students will have to listen to it, and they have to take down notes and reconstruct the text or the reading of the listening task in their own words. Now, the first time that you read out or play the file, they're not going to take down notes. They're just going to listen for general comprehension, the main idea. The next time you read it, they're going to take down notes, And then they pool their notes together, either in small groups or in pairs, and have to reconstruct the text in their own words. Again, the reason why I like Dictogloss is it also doubles up as a writing activity if you really want that for your class. So either you keep the reconstruction as an oral summary, which they read out in their groups or in front of the class, or you could also have them produce a coherent writing task based on what they have heard. And it has to be as close to the original as possible. Right, so that was just the tip of the iceberg. And what I've covered this far is how we can introduce certain skills into our regular LSRW classes, lessons. But what would teaching be without testing? That's when Trinity comes into the picture with IC, or Integrated Skills in English. IC is a brilliant contemporary 4-skills exam, 4-skills qualification, and consists of 2 independent modules, the reading and writing module and the listening and speaking module. IC is perfect for 21st century learners because it doesn't just test language skills. It goes one step further and promotes the development of crucial transferable skills and study strategies, what we had discussed earlier in the webinar today. So if you're practicing for a qualification like IC, or if you've done well in IC, these skills automatically develop. So to give you a little bit of a background about the IC, it also happens to be one of the most well-researched academic qualifications. So we take a lot of pride in that. Trinity College London worked in partnership with University of Bedfordshire's Crella and Lancaster University, 2 giants in the field of language testing. So because of its deep academic focus, IC is perfect for young people and adults in schools, colleges, and at work. It also very naturally integrates all 4 skills, and it replicates how skills come together in real life. So just to give you an example, if you're listening to something, would you also not want to take down notes and speak about what you've heard? Or if you're reading something on your phone, it's quite natural to want to comment or tweet about it on social media. This is pretty much what you'll be doing in IC. You read and then you write, you listen, and then you'll speak, just like you do in real life. So when do you speak without listening in real life? Maybe if you've lost your marbles. And when do you write without reading? That would be very odd. Or if it's just an individual activity that you do, or else there's a link between all 4 skills, and it's important to integrate and bring these skills together. This qualification is calibrated to the CEFR, and I've discussed what CEFR is. So IC is available at 5 different levels on the CEFR. So you have at the most basic level IC Foundation, and at the highest level IC4, which is at CEFR C2. So it's quite obvious that there is a room for everybody. So it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of exam. So this is a brilliant way of showing that a test doesn't do justice if everybody has to do it at the same level, irrespective of their language proficiency. So if all of these animals, can you read what's there on the screen? For a fair selection, everybody has to take the same exam. Please climb that tree. So we don't want to do that. What makes Trinity special is that for all of our exams, there are different levels for every learner. So you're doing justice to everyone by giving them different areas of progress, different levels. And our qualification IC is available at two different levels is available at, there are two independent modules, the reading and writing modules and the listening and speaking modules. Now, these modules can be taken together or at different times whenever the candidate is ready. So if you think that you're ready with a reading and writing, you go ahead and take that first, and then you do a listening and speaking. So it makes it very convenient, the modular approach. Or if you think that you want to do reading and writing at ISC Foundation and listening and speaking at ISC 1, that's okay, that's allowed. And you would still get modular certificates for every module that you take. So right now, what you see on the left, you have speaking and a listening module certificate, you have a reading and writing module certificate. And in order to get your final ISC level certificate or your overarching certificate, you have to take both modules at the same level. That's the only thing that you need to keep in mind. And you get separate results for reading, writing, listening, and speaking in your certificate. Along with your level IC final certificate, each candidate also gets a diagnostic profile report. So this again is brilliant because this is one thing that helps not just candidates but their trainers and their teachers to focus on what or which areas candidates need more focus on. So this profile report breaks every skill down, every part of the exam down to skills and subskills and shows where you need to focus more on. I want to show you what it would look like. So what you have on the screen is a candidate's diagnostic profile in the first task in the reading and writing module. And as you can see, that this particular candidate has done quite well with reading for the main idea and reading carefully for details, but not so much with reading carefully for facts or information. So isn't this amazing? I understand that it's important to get certificates, but for an LSRW qualification, you also need to know where you need to focus on so that you improve. You also need to know which areas you've done well with. So the diagnostic profile is brilliant that way. I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about the format of the exam. The reading and writing module is a 2-hour-long module, and the tasks here are the same across all 4 levels, from IC Foundation to all the way up to IC 3. IC 4 has a completely different format, which we're not going to discuss in this particular webinar. So in IC reading and writing, the kind of tasks and the kind of questions the candidate gets reflects what they would come across in an academic context. So this is what they need. And also in IC, there are no multiple choice questions. So there is absolutely no way you can guess around in the exam. You have to be able to engage with the text. You have to be able to understand at the granular level what the text is about. And the questions move progressively deeper from paragraph to sentence, and then word level understanding of the text. So let's have a quick look at what the tasks look like. So the first one is your long reading task, a more straightforward reading passage that we're all familiar with. And candidates will have to answer 15 questions based on their understanding of the reading passage. Typically, the kind of questions you'd get here would be title matching, selecting true statements, gap fills, something we're quite familiar with, in fact. The second task is the multi-text reading, and this is what I had discussed earlier in context of how modern readers read, and I've taken it from the ISC reading and writing paper. So there are, again, 3 or 4 discrete reading passages, and they're all thematically connected with one infographic in them. And candidates have to answer 15 questions based on their understanding of the 3 passages. And this is how modern readers read. So ISC again reflects how modern text should look like. The third task is where reading and writing come in together. So in order to attempt the writing task here, candidates will have to understand, or they have to curate information from the 3 or 4 passages that they've read. So their understanding of the 3 passages is extremely important here, or else they will not be able to attempt the writing task. And the information cannot be from any other source. It cannot be your own background information. It has to be information from these texts, but in your own words. And so just a little bit here about the writing. It could be any a free writing task like an article or an email or a letter, but related to the text that they have read. The final task in IC, the reading and writing paper, is your extended writing. It's again a free writing task. This is an independent task, so you don't have to read anything else along with this. This is more straightforward. Essay, email, article, etc. Now, coming to the next module, the listening and speaking module, here again, the 2 skills are tested together as well as separately or individually. And there are several tasks. So these tasks grow progressively longer as you go higher up the levels, and they go more and more abstract. There are many different tasks. So this is what you would have in your listening and speaking module. So you have typically a topic task and a conversation task, which is common, as you can see, across all levels. There's also a collaborative task that gets added from ISC 2 upwards. You also have independent listening tasks. So let's see what each tasks are about. The topic task is a very popular task, in fact, because candidates are given the opportunity to come prepared with a topic in advance of the exam. And then the examiner and the candidate work together they co-construct the topic together. So it's a co-constructed task, and it's dialogic. The conversation is highly dialogic, and there is a lot of control on the candidate. So even though you're given the chance to prepare a topic ahead of the exam, there is absolutely no scope to learn it by heart and regurgitate. So it's not a memory test, neither is it a Q&A. The candidate and the examiner co-construct the task. Also, the candidate has to demonstrate certain language functions and grammar from the level that they're appearing for, because at the end of the day, it's an English language assessment. The conversation task is where the examiner chooses a subject area from a list of conversation subject areas in the syllabus. And again, the examiner and the candidate co-construct it and have a conversation. Absolutely no scope of learning by heart. And again, the candidate has to demonstrate language functions of the level they're at. The second task that you see here, or the collaborative task, gets added from IC 2 upwards. Again, this is a brilliant task because it replicates how authentic communication is in real life. So the candidate is given a prompt by the examiner. It could be a dilemma prompt, it could be an opinion prompt, and the candidate has to bring the prompt to a logical conclusion. I'm going to read out a prompt for you so you have a sense of what I mean when I say a prompt. So my nephew's birthday is coming up and he wants a mobile phone. He's only 7 and I'm not sure it's a good idea. So this is your prompt that the examiner gives you. For this task, the examiner talks less and less, and the candidate has to talk more, has to take more responsibility of the conversation, will have to find out what the examiner's backstory is. So For every prompt, the examiner comes with an imagined story, a backstory for every candidate. And it's the candidate's responsibility to elicit that backstory from the examiner. So it's a role reversal here. Your learners will have to get out of the whole passively answering questions. So passively answering questions, I beg your pardon. They will have to take at every stage of the task, be able to ask questions, elicit information, which is why it's again a task that is not just testing language skills, it's testing something that's extremely important in communicative competence, which is called strategic competence. So you're using different kinds of strategies and elicitation techniques to bridge a breakdown in communication. Coming to the listening tasks. So it can vary from 6 minutes to 8 minutes, and they go more and more abstract as you go higher up the levels. For the independent tasks, independent listening tasks, candidates will have to listen to the task, will have to, at the lower levels, it's more structured. So they listen, they have to report information back to the examiner, and also answer questions asked by the examiner. And at the higher levels, it's less structured, so the candidates will have to identify the speaker's line of argument, what the speaker's tone is, what is not explicitly stated. So grows more and more abstract with the higher levels. Listening is also tested with the speaking tasks as well as individually or discretely. Now, that was in a nutshell the format of the exam, but I'm sure you'd like to know more about the recognition bit of any qualification. So IC qualifications are a robust evidence of language proficiency, and it is accepted by universities all over the world. And we're very proud to say that 98% universities in the UK accept this qualification, and some of the best names. So you have Trinity College Dublin, you have King's College London, London School of Economics. They all recognize IC. And there's a growing number of universities in North America, in Europe as well. So if you have any questions, perhaps you could just have a look at the link that we have posted here for you to look at. And there's a list of universities that you can have maybe check with and see if those universities, or if there are any other universities that you need to find more details about. Our website, especially the one on ISC, is a treasure trove of information and guidance and resources. So according to every level, please don't think that this is just ISC. You also see that there is A2, B1, B2. So you decide what level your students are. And we would love for you to use our resources because they're absolutely brilliant. And for every level, there are different kinds of guidance genres. There is, of course, the syllabus. You also see different practice papers which you can use in your regular LSRW classes. So you also have, say, a long reading task with lots of activities that you can use in your classroom. There's also something called the scheme of work, which is an invaluable tool for teachers because it's a 10-week-long program, 10-week-long coursework plan for teachers. So if you think that you want to do an LSRW thorough class with your students, but you don't have the time to stick to a pattern, this is a template which throws up different kinds of activities according to the levels. So all you need to do is download it and use it in your classroom. And the best part is all these resources are free. So have fun with them. I think that's it for today because we're already running out of time. And if there's anything that you want to, if you want to reach out to us, this is your the information that you need to keep in mind. Dale, do you want to add something here?
No, firstly, thank you very much, Shoma. So
Welcome.
a lot of appreciation coming in on the chat. They found the information extremely helpful, meaningful, insightful, and thoughtful. Someone actually said, thank you for sharing and caring, which I think is a brilliant moniker for what we're really trying to do, is to help bring all of this a lot closer.